I still remember the night like it was yesterday. The rain had been falling steadily, washing the city streets, but inside my small apartment, I felt a storm far fiercer than any weather outside. My name is Blessing, and at 27, I thought I had life figured out. I had a steady job in a bank, a close circle of friends who knew my every secret, and Victor, my love, my heart, and my future, or so I believed. Victor was not just my fiancé, he was the father of my child. We had met in university, back when life felt simple and dreams felt endless. I remembered how he had swept me off my feet with his laughter, his way of making even the most ordinary days feel extraordinary. We had shared our first apartment together, laughed over burnt food, argued over silly things, and celebrated small victories as if they were grand. Life felt complete, and I trusted in the bond we had built, unaware that destiny had already started drawing lines that would split our world apart. Everything changed when the doctors called him in for a checkup one chilly morning in March. I was at work when his nurse's voice came through my phone, trembling as she explained that Victor's kidneys were failing and that he needed a transplant immediately. I felt the ground disappear beneath me, my heart pounding so fiercely it was as though it might leap out of my chest. I could barely hear her words after the first few seconds. My fiancé, my love, my Victor. He could die if a donor was not found. I did not hesitate. There was no thought of my own health, no fear, no hesitation at all. I told the doctors I would donate my kidney. When I told Victor, I saw the panic and guilt flash across his face, the same look his mother had when I informed them. His mother, Grace, shook her head, whispering that it was dangerous, that I would ruin my own life, that he had to survive without me risking everything. My father, stern and silent, called me reckless, but I did not waver. Victor's life mattered more than every warning, more than every fear. The night before the surgery, I sat beside his hospital bed, holding his hand, feeling the rhythm of his pulse through my fingertips. "You have to come back to me," I whispered, pressing my forehead to his arm. He squeezed my hand weakly, eyes glistening with something I could not name: fear, love, guilt. That night, I prayed harder than I ever had, silently promising the universe that I would do everything to save the man I loved. The surgery was grueling, but the doctors were skilled. Victor survived. I recovered slowly, my body aching, my energy sapped, but every time I saw him smile, I felt a flicker of hope. Life returned, and for a while, it felt like we could breathe again, like we could pick up the pieces and move forward together. Yet, even as I smiled for his sake, a small shadow of unease settled in my chest. Victor's smile seemed heavier, more forced, and his words, once warm and tender, felt measured, distant. And then, one evening, exactly 6 months after my kidney had saved his life, he vanished. Not a word, not a call, not a hint. One moment he was there, holding me, whispering promises of forever, and the next he was gone. His family, who had once warned me against helping him, suddenly found it easy to stay silent. Calls went unanswered, messages ignored, and the home we had dreamed of building together became a void filled with silence. I was left staring at the space where he used to be, my heart torn, my soul heavy, and a sense of dread creeping into every corner of my life. I did not know if he had died, if something had happened, or if he had simply chosen to disappear. And in that uncertainty, my world began to fracture. The night I realized Victor had truly left, I sat in the dark, holding a tiny blanket with the faint smell of him lingering on it. Tears streamed down my face, but my mind was racing, desperate for answers. Every ring of the phone, every shadow at the window made my heart leap. My friends tried to console me, but they could not understand the betrayal that began to bloom in my chest, the fear, the confusion, the unbearable longing. I wanted to scream, to break, to run away, yet I stayed, waiting for a miracle that would never come. And then, one evening, a neighbor whispered something that planted the first seed of what would later become my plan. A wedding had been whispered about, far away from the eyes of those who loved me. My stomach twisted at the thought, and a cold fury began to simmer deep inside. I did not yet know who, where, or when, but the knowledge alone made my nights restless, my mind sharp, and my heart prepared for a storm I did not yet understand. This was how my life began to unravel, how the man I had given everything for chose to vanish, leaving me with nothing but memories, pain, and the first taste of a betrayal so deep I could feel it in my bones. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, but Victor did not return. At first, I convinced myself it was some cruel twist of fate, that he might be in an accident or hospitalized somewhere far from me. I went to every hospital I could think of, called every number I had, even contacted friends of his, but nothing. No one seemed to know anything. His own family acted like I was asking for something impossible. His mother, Grace, feigned ignorance, brushing off my calls with practiced calm, telling me he was busy, that he needed space. But I knew the truth. I could feel it in the silence. I struggled with every waking moment. I barely ate, barely slept, and my job became a shadow of itself as I walked through the days in a haze. Friends tried to help, but it was like explaining pain to someone who had never felt it. They could not understand how it felt to pour your body and soul into saving someone's life, only to be abandoned without explanation. My parents, though angry at Victor, could see the damage in me. My father's stoic face would soften when he saw me crying alone in my room, and my mother would sit beside me, holding my hands and whispering that I was stronger than I realized. It was during one of these days that I met James, a colleague at the bank. He noticed my withdrawn demeanor, the way I flinched when people mentioned Victor, and he reached out gently. I hated myself for letting him in at first. How could I care for anyone when my heart was broken, when the person I loved most had vanished like smoke in the wind? Yet, James had a kindness I could not ignore, a warmth that reminded me of days before everything fell apart. He became a friend, a small anchor in the storm, but even then I felt guilty. How could I allow myself to smile, even slightly, when Victor's betrayal was still fresh in my blood? Meanwhile, life without answers continued to haunt me. I received occasional letters from the hospital, reports, and reminders of the surgery, each one a cruel reminder that I had given part of myself for a man who no longer existed in my life. And then there were rumors, small things that reached me like whispers on the wind. Friends of friends spoke of Victor, seen at parties, laughing, living, moving on. I could not bear to confront the truth, yet my heart knew it. He was alive. He had chosen to disappear. Victor's family became my tormentors without ever intending to be cruel. They subtly blamed me for pushing him, or being too much, as if donating a kidney had been a mistake, a crime. Grace's cold smiles and Victor's father's dismissive nods gnawed at my resolve, each one a reminder that loyalty, love, and sacrifice meant nothing to them. And worse, the silence from Victor himself was deafening. Every unanswered call, every missed message, every vanishing trace of his life felt like a knife twisting deeper into my chest. One evening, while sorting through old letters and photos, I found a small, folded piece of paper tucked inside Victor's wallet, one he must have forgotten. It was a note, brief and casual, yet it struck like thunder. I need to find myself first. Don't wait for me. My hands shook as I read it, and the tears fell like rain. That was it. That was my answer. He had abandoned me, and the man I had saved with my own flesh and blood had no intention of returning. The months after that were the darkest. I could feel the edges of my mind fraying. Nights were endless, filled with questions that had no answers, and days were gray, heavy with the weight of betrayal. I questioned myself constantly. Had I given too much, loved too much, trusted too much? And yet, deep down, I knew that love itself had not failed. Victor had failed me. And in that failure, I felt something I could not ignore. Anger, pure and consuming, simmering under the grief. And then, exactly a year after he disappeared, the rumors became clearer. Victor had been preparing for a wedding, a new life with another woman, a woman chosen by his family. I stumbled upon the first piece of evidence by accident, a photograph online, a small glimpse of a dress, a smile I knew too well. My heart stopped, a violent ache in my chest, and for a moment I thought I might faint. The man I had saved, the man I had loved, was planning to marry someone else. Not just anyone, but someone his family had approved, the life he had chosen over mine. The fury that rose in me was unlike anything I had ever felt. Grief mixed with betrayal, with rage, with disbelief. How could he do this? How could they all do this to me, after everything I had given, after everything I had endured? And yet, amidst the pain, a cold clarity settled. If he thought he could move on, that he could erase me from his life, then he had underestimated the depth of what I was capable of. I began to watch, to wait, to plan. Every detail I could gather, every whispered word, every accidental discovery became a piece of a puzzle I intended to complete. Victor had taken from me the trust, the love, and the sacrifice of a lifetime. Now I would reclaim my power. And as I stared at his photograph, smiling in that engagement party picture I had stumbled upon, I realized that the story of Victor and Blessing was far from over. It was 6 months after the first hint of Victor's new life when I finally understood the depth of the betrayal. I had followed every lead, pieced together fragments of information, and my gut told me the truth before the final confirmation came. Victor was engaged, and the wedding was imminent. Not just a casual engagement. This was a grand affair, one designed to show the world that he had moved on without a trace of regret. His family, who had once dismissed me, now supported every step of his new life, celebrating the very man who had abandoned me. I remember the night I saw them together for the first time in public. It was at a high-end restaurant, a small gathering, but I was there by chance, having gone to meet a friend who worked nearby. And there he was, Victor, smiling, laughing, holding the hand of a woman I had never met before. She was beautiful, yes, but the beauty did not compare to the anguish that washed over me. His hand, the one I had held through nights of pain and surgery, now rested on hers. My chest tightened, my vision blurred, and for the first time in months, I felt my heart break in a way that left me gasping. I wanted to run, to escape the unbearable reality, but something inside me stayed rooted to the spot. The rage I had nurtured, the sorrow I had buried, and the injustice of it all boiled to the surface. I realized then that this was no longer just about heartbreak. This was about betrayal, about a life built on lies, about the very people who had taught me trust turning into shadows of deceit. For days, I could not eat, could not sleep. My mind was a storm, my thoughts looping endlessly over every detail. How could Victor, my Victor, move on so quickly, while I had been left in a limbo of despair? And then, the final revelation came through an accidental encounter. I ran into a distant cousin of Victor's at the market, someone who did not know I had been searching for him. She spoke carelessly, laughing at a memory I did not want to hear. I can't believe Victor is getting married already. I thought Blessing would be by his side forever. It's been barely a year, and he's with Rosemary now. His parents are overjoyed. I felt the ground vanish beneath me. Rosemary. That was the woman. The same one whose hand had replaced mine in every photograph, every whispered secret, every celebration that should have been ours. My blood ran cold, my stomach twisted, and for a moment, I thought I would lose myself completely. I was furious, devastated, and yet, an icy clarity formed in my mind. This was not the time to crumble. If anything, it was the time to act. For the next few weeks, I planned. I watched the wedding arrangements, traced every detail I could find, and silently gathered strength. I remembered the pain, the nights I had cried alone, the fear of never seeing him again, the hollow days of uncertainty. And I knew that nothing, absolutely nothing, would make me forgive him. Not now, not ever. My anger became purpose, and my sorrow transformed into a calculated resolve. The turning point came one evening when I received a small tip from someone involved in the wedding preparations. A careless comment, a fleeting remark. The ceremony would be lavish, 1,000 guests, and the church would be filled with faces that once celebrated us. My heart pounded as I imagined the scene, Victor smiling, marrying Rosemary, unaware that I knew everything. The thought of him so comfortable, so unburdened by guilt, made my blood boil. And then I made my decision. It would not be violent in the traditional sense, but it would ensure he felt the weight of every betrayal, every sleepless night I had endured, every tear I had shed while he built a new life without me. I had learned patience in the months of his absence. I had learned observation, stealth, and cunning. The Victor who had abandoned me would finally confront the consequences of his actions. The final detail fell into place by accident, a small oversight on Victor's part. A family member had mentioned the timing of the vows, the exact moment he would stand at the altar, surrounded by family and friends. It was the perfect moment, precise, public, unforgettable. My mind, which had been teetering on the edge of despair and madness, now focused with razor-sharp clarity. I would be there. I would ensure that the life he had so easily built without me would come crashing down at the moment he felt most untouchable. That night, as I prepared, I felt a mixture of fear and exhilaration. I knew what I was about to do was dangerous, but it was the only way to reclaim the power he had stolen. Every memory of our time together, every ache in my heart, every moment of helplessness became fuel. I was no longer the woman who had donated her kidney out of love and trust. I was the woman they had underestimated, the woman whose heart had been shattered and forged into something unrecognizable, something unstoppable. And as I looked in the mirror, steadying my hands, taking a slow, deep breath, I whispered to myself, Victor will never forget me. Not now. Not ever. The morning of the wedding arrived with a strange mix of serenity and tension. The sun shone bright over the church compound, birds chirped as if nothing had happened, and yet the air around me felt charged, like the calm before a storm. I had waited for this day for months, watching, planning, and preparing myself for the moment when Victor would finally face the consequences of abandoning me. Every step I took toward the church was deliberate, quiet, and filled with purpose. Inside, the preparations were in full swing. White drapes hung from the ceilings, flowers lined the aisles, and the gentle hum of classical music filled the space. Guests chatted in small groups, unaware that a storm had already walked through the doors. Victor's parents were busy welcoming family, his father with a smug smile, as if to say everything had turned out exactly the way he wanted. Grace, his mother, was radiant, pride written all over her face, unaware that the woman she had once dismissed was now moving silently through her carefully constructed world. I stayed in the shadows, observing. I watched Victor as he adjusted his suit, smiling nervously at a cousin who made a joke about the ceremony. He looked healthy, alive, and completely ignorant of the chaos about to unfold. My heart thudded with a strange mix of hatred, sorrow, and exhilaration. I could see every detail, the way he shifted his weight, the small crease between his eyebrows, the way Rosemary's hand rested lightly on his arm. It was perfect, the kind of moment that would shatter completely with a single calculated act. The ceremony began, and my stomach tightened. Guests were seated, musicians had begun to play, and Victor's face lit up with anticipation as he waited at the altar. The priest started the opening prayer, the room hushed, and the air felt heavy, each second stretching longer than the last. I moved closer, careful to stay unnoticed, every step measured. The acid was hidden, ready, the culmination of months of planning. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the intensity of the moment. Every memory of betrayal, abandonment, and sleepless nights coursed through me. Then came the vows. Rosemary began to speak, her voice trembling slightly with emotion, unaware that the world she had imagined would soon crumble. Victor reached for her hand, his eyes soft, tender, and completely unprepared. That's when I made my move. In one swift motion, I approached the altar, every heartbeat loud in my ears, and poured the acid with precision. The world erupted instantly. The sound of screams, the scent of chaos, the shrill cries of pain and panic. Guests scrambled in every direction, some falling over chairs, others screaming as the confusion spread. The wedding, the ceremony, the picture-perfect life they had tried to build disintegrated in an instant. Victor shrieked, the realization of what had happened flashing in his eyes, a mix of shock, fear, and regret. Rosemary screamed, clutching his arm, as the chaos swallowed the entire space. I did not stop to watch the aftermath. I slipped out quietly, disappearing into the crowd outside, letting the pandemonium I had orchestrated unfold behind me. I felt a rush unlike any other, a blend of relief, sorrow, and vindication. After months of pain and uncertainty, I had reclaimed a fragment of the power they had stolen from me. In the days that followed, news of the wedding disaster spread like wildfire. Victor's family tried to salvage their dignity, but the story had already escaped, and there was no hiding the magnitude of what had occurred. I remained in the shadows, observing from a distance, knowing that their carefully constructed lives had been shaken to the core. I did not celebrate. I did not gloat. I only felt a sense of closure beginning to settle over me. I spent the nights afterwards reflecting on everything that had happened, the love I had given, the sacrifices I had made, the betrayal I had endured, and the path I had chosen to confront it. My body ached from the months of stress, my mind still replayed Victor's face in disbelief, and yet I felt something I had not felt in a long time. Control, a quiet power reclaimed from the hands of those who had sought to destroy me. Even as the chaos unfolded behind me, I realized the truth I had always known. Victor's betrayal was not the end of my story. It was a turning point, a dark chapter that had tested my strength, my patience, and my resolve. And through it all, I had emerged unbroken, even if scarred. The experience had changed me, hardened me, and yet taught me something invaluable. Nothing and no one could ever diminish my worth or my strength. I walked away from that day knowing one thing. Closure does not come from revenge or destruction or the fear instilled in others. Closure comes from reclaiming yourself, from standing in your power, and from refusing to let the betrayal define you. And for the first time in months, I felt a quiet, unshakable peace. Victor disappeared again, but this time not by choice. He was forced to confront the ruin that followed him wherever he went. The police investigations, the news stories, and the whispers among friends and family painted a portrait of a life unraveling. I stayed distant, watching from afar, learning that the power I had feared to wield was within me all along. I no longer felt the need for confrontation or validation. The act had been a release, but what I gained afterward was far greater: clarity and freedom. I spent the next few months rebuilding myself. Friends who had supported me during Victor's disappearance became pillars of strength. James, who had been patient and steady, offered companionship without demanding anything I was not ready to give. I took long walks in the mornings, feeling the sun on my face and the wind in my hair, each breath a reminder that life continued, even after betrayal. Slowly, I found my laughter again, hesitant at first, but growing stronger, fuller, as if I were reclaiming pieces of myself I had lost along the way. It was during one quiet evening, sitting by my window with a cup of tea, that I reflected on everything I had endured: the pain, the uncertainty, the betrayal, and the desperation. I realized that giving Victor my kidney had not been a mistake. It had been a testament to my love, to my capacity for selflessness. But what I had learned through the aftermath was equally important. Love without respect and gratitude can be destructive, and sometimes the person you sacrifice for is not the one meant to receive your devotion. I had given part of myself to save him, but I did not lose myself in the process. I survived, and that survival was my victory. I also learned to forgive, not for him, but for me. Forgiveness was not forgetting. It was releasing the poison that had threatened to consume my soul. The rage, the heartbreak, and the despair had served their purpose, guiding me toward action when necessary, but I would not allow them to dictate the rest of my life. I discovered that my strength lay not in revenge alone, but in my ability to rise above the pain, to build a life unshaken by the betrayals of others. Victor's name still stung occasionally, but the intensity had dulled. I no longer obsessed over what he had done or how he had replaced me. I focused instead on my child, my career, my friendships, and my dreams. I returned to the small apartment where life had once felt peaceful, and now it felt sacred, a space where I could exist fully, without fear or restraint. Every scar, every tear, every sleepless night had shaped me into a version of myself stronger, wiser, and unafraid. And then came the unexpected. Love, gentle and unassuming, found its way back to me. Not as a replacement for what I had lost, but as a companion for the life I had reclaimed. I met Miracle, a kind and understanding soul, who did not demand my past but embraced my present. Together, we laughed over small, silly things, celebrated mundane victories, and shared quiet evenings that reminded me that life, despite its betrayals, could still be beautiful. Looking back now, I understand the journey I endured was as much about Victor as it was about me. He taught me the depth of betrayal, but also the power of resilience. The woman who had poured her love and life into saving him had survived the worst, reclaimed her power, and discovered a version of herself she might never have known otherwise. The pain was real, the heartbreak intense, but the healing was profound. As I sit here today, watching my child play in the sun, with Miracle by my side, I feel whole in a way I never thought possible. Victor's absence no longer haunts me. It serves as a reminder that life gives and takes, and that true strength is not in clinging to what was lost, but in embracing what remains and building something better from it. I am not the same blessing who cried through the nights, nor am I the one who allowed despair to rule my days. I am stronger, wiser, and unbreakable. And if there is one truth I have learned from this journey, it is this: betrayal can shatter you, but it can also reveal the unshakable power within you, the kind of power that no one can ever steal again. I close that chapter not with vengeance alone, but with peace, understanding, and the knowledge that my life, my love, and my strength are mine to command. And with that, I finally feel free.